Let's kick this list off with a classic that needs no introduction. But we're giving it one anyway. Final Fantasy X dropped in 2001, basically right when the PS2 was still figuring out how to walk. And yet, somehow, this game showed up like, hey, what if we just broke the scale for how good a game can look? The visual upgrade from Final Fantasy IX to this was absurd. At the time, it felt like games had somehow skipped a console generation overnight. This was the first Final Fantasy with voice acting, fully animated cutscenes, and a cinematic style that pushed the PS2 harder than anyone expected that early on. The hardware may have been weaker than the GameCube and the original Xbox on paper, but Final Fantasy X proved that great optimization and strong artistic direction could embarrass raw specs. And this wasn't just pretty for the time, it still holds up today. The remaster, which you can play on basically every modern platform, only reinforces how ahead of the curve this game really was. Yeah, the lip syncing was kinda cursed, but hey, baby steps. And beyond the eye candy, Final Fantasy X made some bold gameplay choices. It ditched the active time battle system for a pure turn-based setup called Conditional Turn-Based Battle System, or CTB. This let players plan out their moves with more strategy, since turn order could be influenced by actions taken in combat. Combine that with the Sphere Grid, which replaced traditional leveling with a sprawling upgrade board full of choices, and you've got one of the most customizable and satisfying progression systems in the series. Next up is Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria. And let me tell you, this game didn't just look good for its time, it looked unfairly good. Tri-Ace, the same folks behind the Star Ocean series, were on a mission to make eyeballs melt with visuals, and they pretty much nailed it. Back then, pushing the PS2 to its absolute limit was their brand. And Silmeria is living proof. This game is straight up stunning, not just in raw graphics, but in the art direction too. We're talking layered environments, rich colors, beautifully animated sprites, the whole package. But what really sets Silmeria apart, though, is its unique battle system. Instead of traditional turn-based combat, it uses a dynamic positioning system where you control up to 4 characters in real time, each mapped to a face button. Battles play out on a 2.5D plane with movement points limiting your freedom, which forces you to think strategically about positioning, timing, and combos. Chaining attacks across multiple characters feels super satisfying, especially when you pull off those flashy finishers. It's part turn-based and part action, and somehow still feels ahead of its time even today. And here's where things get even more impressive. Valkyrie Profile 2 was built on a custom engine developed by Tri-Ace, designed from the ground up to squeeze every last drop of power out of the PS2. This wasn't some off-the-shelf solution. It gave the team full control to craft complex environments, blend 2D and 3D assets seamlessly, and animate everything with a level of polish that felt way ahead of its time. The environments are packed with parallax scrolling layers that give the world a real sense of depth, especially during exploration and platforming segments. The lighting system, while subtle, adds this soft atmospheric glow that shifts depending on your location. And even the particle effects in battle, from magical flares to weapon trails, are rendered with a finesse that feels like pure sorcery on PS2 hardware. Honestly, it's a crime this hasn't gotten a proper remaster yet. This one really deserves some love because even 2 decades later, Valkyrie Profile 2 still looks so polished you'd swear it was faking its birth certificate.
Leave the rest to me! Finishing strike!
There was a weird moment in gaming history when someone at EA looked at Final Fantasy X, then looked at The Lord of the Rings and said, yeah, mash those together. Well, that's exactly what the Third Age did. And somehow it kind of worked. This wasn't about Frodo or Aragorn, though. Instead, you followed a backup squad of original characters, conveniently placed just behind the main cast. quietly saving Middle-earth without anyone noticing. Subtle, right? Story-wise, it's basically glorified fanfiction. But visually, the game was a stunner for its time. Bright spell effects, cinematic camera angles, and that classic early 2000s EA polish made it feel surprisingly high budget. And the combat system, which borrowed heavily from Final Fantasy X, gave it a nice, strategic rhythm that honestly didn't feel out of place in Tolkien's world. Well, maybe a little, but let's not ruin the fun. Back when this dropped, I was deep in my Lord of the Rings obsession era, watching the extended editions on loop, quoting Gandalf like it was scripture. So yeah, I played the hell out of this game, and for a PlayStation 2 title, it looked clean, and the battle cinematics actually felt pretty epic for the time. Sure, the plot bends over backwards to wedge in a second secret fellowship led by Gandalf, which makes zero sense. But hey, it gave us an excuse to explore Middle-earth in a new way. One thing that's actually cool under the hood is how the Third Age handled its character progression. Instead of sticking to rigid classes, each character evolved in a more flexible tree, allowing you to blend tanky, magic, and offensive skills over time. You would gain abilities by using specific attacks repeatedly, unlocking upgraded versions in kind of a learn-by-doing system. The game also let you swap party members mid-battle, adding a tactical layer that felt pretty advanced compared to most console RPGs at the time. It wasn't revolutionary, but for fans of both turn-based combat and Tolkien, it hit a really sweet spot.
Gandalf, welcome back. Take a few of these, if you don't mind.
You sure he's in this backwoods bumpkin town?
The information came from a critic.
Rogue Galaxy didn't care about looking realistic. It didn't want to be gritty or moody or whatever was trendy back then. It wanted to be a freaking anime, and it nailed it. This thing looked like a Saturday morning cartoon had a baby with a JRPG and somehow made it run perfectly on a PS2. Developed by Level 5 and published by Sony, Rogue Galaxy came out when the PS2 was already packing its bags, and yet it managed to steal the show. Bright colors, character models were expressive, environments were rich with detail, and the lighting effects during combat were ridiculously over the top in the best way possible. Now, what really sets Rogue Galaxy apart is how much stuff it crammed into one disc. We're talking about open-world exploration across multiple planets with no loading screens between areas, which was basically witchcraft at the time, real-time battles where you could tag between party members on the fly, and a weapon fusion system that was weirdly satisfying. Oh, and there's the Revelation flowchart, a mechanic where characters unlock new abilities through a kind of branching skill grid tied to specific items. Sounds simple, but it adds this layer of strategy where you're constantly tweaking your inventory to unlock that one move you've been eyeing for hours. Another feature that deserves some love is the factory system. And no, this isn't some throwaway minigame. It's a full-blown crafting puzzle where you build and automate production lines to create powerful items and gear. You're not just dumping ingredients into a menu, you're placing machines, adjusting conveyor belts, managing timing, assigning workers, and making sure everything flows like a tiny, chaotic JRPG-themed version of Factorio. And the best part? There's a port to PS4 that runs buttery smooth on PS5. It still looks fantastic. And unlike many underrated gems, this one actually deserves the praise. Quick break. If you're enjoying the ride so far, tapping the like button takes less than half a second and helps more than you think. And tell me, which PS2 RPG impressed you the most visually back in the day? Comments are the best way to help the channel, since the algorithm loves videos with lots of engagement. And I read and reply to every single one.
Hey! What's the big idea? You can't chop up the wings!
Next on the list is Grandia 3, and man, talk about going out with style. Released in 2005 in Japan and 2006 elsewhere, this was basically the series' last big console, and what a send-off it was. Game Arts came in swinging, backed by Square Enix, and delivered a turn-based RPG that looked like it belonged on next-gen hardware. The story follows Yuki, a kid with dreams of flying, and while the plot starts off wholesome, it takes some, let's say, unexpected turns. But what really stuck with most people was how good this game looked. We're talking crisp 3D models, flashy spell effects, and some seriously smooth animations that pushed the PS2 like it owed the money. The battle system deserves its own spotlight, though. Grandia 3 continues the series' tradition of using a dynamic turn-based combat system with a visible timeline that tracks both action readiness and interruption opportunities. This lets you plan attacks with surgical precision, or chaos, depending on your vibe, and time interrupts that can cancel enemy actions mid-animation. But what really elevates the combat here is how seamlessly it ties into the visuals. Attacks explode with lighting effects, camera sweeps, and cinematic zooms that feel more like an anime fight than a typical JRPG turn. And if you really want to see Grandia 3 flex, just pay attention to the aerial combos. Unlike most turn-based systems that keep everyone grounded, this one lets you literally launch enemies into the air with certain skills and chain follow-ups before they even touch the ground. It's a mechanic that rewards timing and party synergy, especially if you're stacking moves that extend airtime or delay recovery. And it's not just visual flair either, as mid-air combos can be used to delay tough enemies from acting, or even knock them out of key attacks entirely. The first two might get all the nostalgic love, but Grandia 3 is an absolute banger that deserves way more credit.
I'm loaded with dynamite!
Next up is a trilogy that honestly makes you wonder what kind of black magic Monolith Soft was working with back then. A trilogy that tried to cram 1,000 years of lore, philosophy, and sci-fi weirdness into 3 games, and somehow still managed to look amazing while doing it. But the Xenosaga series isn't just ambitious in scope, it's flat-out gorgeous for a PS2 title. All 3 entries push the console to its limits, with cinematic cutscenes that went on longer than some movies, and character models that felt way ahead of their time. If Final Fantasy XII didn't exist, this would probably be the best-looking RPG on the system. What really makes Xenosaga stand out, though, is the consistency. Monolith Soft, the same studio that now builds entire open worlds in Xenoblade, and the creators of Xenogears, was already flexing hard back then. The environments, the lighting, the mecha designs, everything looked premium. And this wasn't a one-and-done situation, as they kept that same high production value across the whole trilogy. It's the kind of visual work that makes you do a double take and wonder how a 20-year-old game still holds up this well. And one of the most interesting aspects of Xenosaga is how it blends turn-based combat with cinematic presentation. Instead of random encounters, battles are often set up within the game's environments and transition smoothly without jarring cuts. The system uses action points, allowing you to chain attacks or save them up for massive combos, adding a layer of strategy that goes deeper than just mashing buttons. Plus, the tech attacks were flashy as hell, with full cinematic sequences that somehow ran smooth even on the PS2. Digital Devil Saga is one of those rare moments where Atlus looked at the PS2 and said, "Yeah, let's go full cinematic." And they meant it. This wasn't just some quirky low-budget RPG. They poured serious money into this thing. Top-tier voice actors, a killer art direction, and visuals that still punch way above their weight even today. What's even more impressive is how the game pulls this off without relying on flashy, pre-rendered cutscenes every 5 minutes. And most of Digital Devil Saga's visual punch comes from its real-time engine. Sharp texture mapping, dynamic lighting, and subtle animation work that gives every environment a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. It honestly makes Persona 3 and 4 look like budget spin-offs in comparison. And yet, guess who got famous? Yep, the cheaper ones, classic Atlus. But what really sets Digital Devil Saga apart is how bold it was. It's a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei, but it plays like its own beast. Darker, sharper, and more polished than most of its siblings. And yeah, if you've never played it, do yourself a favor. Just good luck finding a PS3 or a PS2 unless you've got a time machine or alternative methods. But it's absolutely worth the effort. Now, one of the most interesting mechanics in Digital Devil Saga is the mantra system. Instead of leveling up with basic XP and unlocking random spells, you actually equip mantras, kind of like skill trees, that you devour experience into. And yes, I said devour. Because in this game, characters literally turn into demons and eat their enemies to grow stronger. It's as twisted as it sounds, and it ties directly into the story's themes of survival and identity. Kingdom Hearts 2 wasn't just a sequel, it was a full-blown glow-up. While the first game already looked great for its time, the second came in swinging like it knew it had something to prove. Smoother animations, sharper character models, way better lighting. It just felt tighter in every single way. Tetsuya Nomura and his team clearly pushed the console to its absolute limits. And the result was something that still holds up today without needing any for-its-time asterisks. And here's the thing, good graphics alone don't make a game beautiful, and Kingdom Hearts 2 nailed it because it had direction. Every world felt distinct, every cutscene had energy, and visually, it knew exactly what it wanted to be. A playable anime fever dream dipped in Disney magic, and the remastered version made that even more obvious. Upscaling textures is one thing, but when the core art direction is this strong, the visuals stay impressive no matter what year it is. Now, one of the coolest technical tricks in Kingdom Hearts 2 was how it handled enemy swarms with dynamic camera control and LOD scaling. Basically, the game would actively adjust detail and processing priority depending on what was closest to the camera and most relevant to the player. This kept the frame rate stable even during chaotic sequences like the infamous Thousand Heartless battle, where you would think the PS2 would melt. The engine also used smart preloading for areas and attack animations, allowing seamless transitions between combat and cutscenes. It's easy to take that stuff for granted now, but back then, that was some next-level engineering.
Here you go.
Star Ocean 3 is another one of those PS2 RPGs that just refuses to look outdated. It's from Tri-Ace, the same studio behind Valkyrie Profile. And just like that one, this game was built to impress. Even now, the visuals still hold up way better than they have any right to. The characters look sharp, the environments are full of life, and everything feels like it was designed by people who actually cared about their craft. The game used dynamic camera angles during battles and cutscenes, something not many RPGs dared to attempt back then. Instead of sticking to static, fixed perspectives, the camera would pan, tilt, and zoom dynamically to emphasize attacks, reactions, or even dramatic dialogue moments. Combine that with detailed character animations and real-time lighting effects. Yes, real-time lighting on a PS2. And you've got a game that looked like it was punching way above its hardware weight class. But what really makes Star Ocean 3 stand out is its combat system. Instead of classic turn-based battles, it drops you into real-time action where you directly control your character while the rest of your party runs on AI. Sounds chaotic, but it works surprisingly well. It keeps fights fast-paced and tactical, especially once you start experimenting with the bonus battle gauge. That little feature rewards you with extra loot and XP for playing smart, or punishes you the moment you get sloppy. The game also has a surprisingly deep crafting and customization system. And if you're into exploring optional mechanics, there's a whole layer of private actions that affect relationships and even the ending. There's a remastered version for PlayStation 4 that adds trophies and runs perfectly on PS5. Sure, it's basically a deluxe port and not a full overhaul, but it still looks stunning, especially for a game that came out before smartphones even existed.
I have a bad feeling about this.
You're ready.
Can you hear me?
Final Fantasy XII was Square Enix showing off, like aggressively showing off. Released near the end of the PS2's life cycle, this game looked so far ahead of its time that people thought their TVs had magically upgraded themselves. Let me explain. While most games were still clinging to that crusty 4:3 aspect ratio, Final Fantasy XII came in with full 16:9 widescreen support. And on those early flat screens, it looked clean. Not just clean, cinematic. If you had one of those slick new TVs back then, you probably felt like you were playing a next-gen title before the next-gen even showed up. What's even crazier is how much of that visual magic came from raw optimization. Final Fantasy XII used a custom engine built from the ground up to squeeze every last drop out of the PS2's hardware. And I mean every drop. The team at Square Enix implemented streaming textures and dynamic level of detail scaling to keep environments massive without tanking the frame rate. Lighting was handled with a baked global illumination trick that made everything feel naturally lit without draining performance. And those soft shadows? Fully pre-rendered and cleverly baked into the environment. And it wasn't just pretty for a PS2 game, it was gorgeous by any standard. Then the remaster came along and basically said, yeah, let's crank the beauty up to 11. Even today, it holds up so well that it's almost unfair to newer games trying to pull off the same scale with triple the power and half the charm. But the real flex? That would be the Gambit system. Instead of hammering through menus every 2 seconds, you could set detailed behavior patterns for your party, like a mini programming language made for RPG nerds. Want your tank to auto-taunt anything that sneezes? Done. Healer keeps everyone alive while you grab snacks? Also done. It turned battles into tactical flowcharts, letting you focus on the big picture instead of babysitting every move. It was bold, it was clever, and yeah, it confused a lot of people at first. But once it clicked, it became one of the most satisfying systems the series had ever pulled off. Alright, now it's your turn. Which of these RPGs do you think still looks amazing today? And did I miss any that deserved a spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really do read and reply to every single one. If you had fun, don't forget to like the video and hit that subscribe button. It means a lot and helps keep this going.